another rant, and this one comes from being on Longhorn Luster's live and talking about being a spirit talker, which I am. And some woman comes across and says that's evil. Now, I also said my aunt was a white witch, because that's what modern times would call it. Back in Jesus' time, what my aunt did, they would have considered as a prophet. She was able to speak to spirits and hear the message of God and pass it on. Now, today, what is considered a black witch would be somebody that performs their certain brand of what's called magic through trickery, through scamming others out of money, through conjectures, and they would use that to scam people. Kind of like the difference between the prophet Moses, who heard the Spirit of God and did as the Spirit of God asked him, but the Pharaoh's prophet used trickery to try and dissuade the Pharaoh from what God was asking. Okay, that's the difference. Now, can a black witch or a bad witch do things that look like a miracle? Sure, they can. Without even doing trickery. But that's not of God. That's the darkness within them calling. A white witch works on the light within them calling. And I was told that that was my gift to carry on for my aunt. Now, whenever I speak to the spirits, I always ask, by the power of Jesus Christ, in the name of God, that they guide me. In the name of Jesus Christ and by the power of God, however you want to put it. I want Jesus and God right there guiding me as I see and speak to these spirits. But somebody will call that evil. Is that any more evil than somebody actually praying and asking for a miracle? Now, all I do is speak to the spirits. These people pray and ask for miracles from spirits that were once human but are now considered saints. Is me sitting down and having a conversation with a spirit, not asking for a miracle, not asking for any favor, just sitting down and saying, hey, who are you? Where are you from? How'd you die? Why are you here? And listening to them. How is that any more evil than somebody sitting down beside their bed with their hands folded and praying to Saint Peter or Saint Augustine or any one of those humans who are not dead and requesting of them a miracle to save their child, to help them with finances, to save their farm? I'm not not asking anybody to save anything I have. Now, when my son went through surgery for his brain, and he could have very well died, in fact, through the first time his aneurysm happened, he did die for a little while. But on his second one, I was at the hospital before he got to the hospital. And then when he was laying in the bed, I seen the glowing spirits. And the glowing spirits usually mean to me a representation of the angels. And I seen the spirits of my relatives. Did I ask them for a miracle? In a way, I asked the glowing spirits for a miracle. I asked them to guide the surgeon's hands. But as far as my relatives went that I seen there, the only thing I asked is whether he lives or dies, to protect him. I didn't ask of them any miracle. Because as a human being before, that is not their place. Their place is meant to guide and protect. Now, is there bad spirits out there? Oh yeah, most certainly. A human being that died, who was a drug dealer or a wife beater or just a plain old nasty person in life, in death, they are the same. They are the same nasty person. That does not change. And a lot of times those spirits do not move on simply because of their own fear of what will happen after they cross. Other spirits, they're still on earth, just like the Native Americans on Lester's land. And they're here because they chose, with God's permission, to stay and do what they can to help the living, or to help in the Native Americans on Longhorn Lester's land, the little girl, to help to make sure that no child suffers the death of an attack from a wild animal as she did, to protect the land. Or in his case, some of them are there protecting them from one single spirit that is there that isn't very nice. He was not nice in life, and he was not nice in death. He was a colonial, and he just was not nice. But according to this so-called Christian woman, she is saying this ordained minister, Christian woman, is evil because I speak to the spirits without asking favor of them that God allows me to see. How is that evil? And how can I see anything after I've asked God's protection as I commune with these spirits? All they're doing is sitting down and having a conversation with the living, just the same as you and I would. They're not asking for any favor, and I'm not asking for any favor. The only thing we're doing is we're sitting and talking. And we may pass on messages. I may pass on to them a message I would like to be relayed to my stepfather. They may pass on to me a message they want relayed to a living human being. They're not asking for any miracles. Just a simple conversation. But that's considered evil. But a Christian goes out, bends on their knees and prays to St. Francis for some kind of miracle to be bestowed upon them. St. Francis, who used to be a human being like you and me, and they're praying to that human being, not God, not Jesus, that human being for a miracle. And often they pray to their dead relatives for a miracle. And they can't even see the spirit they are praying to, but they pray to him. Many of them will pray to that spirit of a human being who is now considered a saint over praying to God first. I pray to God first. Because that's where my first prayer should go. It should not lead to a saint to ask them to perform a miracle for me. My first prayer for a miracle should be given to God and Jesus Christ, not to some saint who was once human. But I'm being called evil because I commune with spirits. I speak to them as one person to another. I don't ask for money when I do this. I don't ask for miracles when I do this. I don't ask for anything that will bring me profit when I do this, because if I did and they could do it for me, I wouldn't be living in a rundown house now, would I? Sitting on a fixed income. I'd be having millions in a bank account that I could live comfortably on. And not worry if tomorrow I'll have enough food to eat. So the last message she sent, she said that don't reply back to her because she won't read it. Well, I replied back to her twice. And she can read it. And pretty much so what I told her is what I'm telling you now. And here's another little tidbit I will tell you. The Bible says, judge not lest ye be judged, for you shall surely be judged the way you judge others. Now, if you are going to judge others for simply having the gift to simply speak to a spirit, because God gave them the gift to see that spirit, and you are going to judge them for that, then you must consider that if you've ever prayed to a saint, whether it be Saint Mary, whether it be Saint Augustine, Saint Michael, or any other saint out there who was once human and is in spirit form, if you have ever prayed to them for a miracle, especially if you prayed to them for a miracle before you even prayed to God for it, and especially if you have prayed to your dead, passed on relatives for that miracle, then consider you shall be judged just as you have judged others. I am no more evil for speaking from my human spirit to their human spirit than these people are for speaking from their human spirit and asking for a miracle from another human spirit that just happens to be called a saint. The only difference is people like me, and, and I think her name was Cassandra, we are not asking for miracles. We are not asking for favor. We're not asking for money. We're not asking for gifts. All we are simply doing is helping the spirit, or helping the living to get a message. This message for Longhorn Lesters was that they wanted to be welcomed on the land. They consider Lester a colonial. Now, what is it you say is a colonial? Isn't a colonial somebody from 17 or 1800 who came here and colonized the country? No, not to them. To them, a colonial is a white person, and the bad spirit on Lester's land is a colonial. Now, what time that colonial died, I don't know. He may have died in the 1700s, 1800s. He may have died in 1960, 1970, whatever. But he wasn't a nice person when he lived. For a time, he had something, whether it was a child, whether it was the property itself, no matter what it was, he had something that calmed his bitterness. Didn't stop him from being bitter, but calmed his bitter. And he lost it. And when he lost it, he grew angry. And he grew even more bitter than what he was before he had it. And then he died. And because of the bitter person he was, nobody knew he was dead for days. Nobody. Because the town folk did not pay attention. It might even been weeks. Because the town folk did not pay attention to him. They avoided him because he was a bitter man. Until one day somebody said, "Hey, you know, we haven't seen old Wilbur or Bill or Bobby or whatever his name was in weeks." And maybe they said it like 5 days afterwards. We haven't seen him in like 5 days. I wonder, is he dead up there? And in the process of that, they may have even said things, "Oh my gosh, it'd be an end of that trouble if he is." But they just left it go. And then another week went by and says, "You know, really, I think maybe we better go up there and check. Because we haven't seen him in 2 weeks. Or a month. Or whatever it was. We haven't seen him. We better get up there and check." And they found him dead. Now, whether or not he was dead by hanging, dead by drowning, dead by natural causes, I don't know. But he was dead. And they found him. And he's bitter. And he stayed as a spirit on the land. And he's still bitter. And the Native Americans want to protect Lester from him. And I don't think that makes any of it evil. It makes it what it is. As a living man, that man was not evil. He was just bitter. He was bitter and nasty. He wasn't very nice to his wife. Everything in his life he owned, whether it be a car or a horse and buggy. I don't know which. All I know is it was his. The land was his. His wife was his. His children was his. It was all his property. And though some of it may have mellowed him a little, and if it is a child he lost, he would have stayed mellow while that child was young. But as that child grew older, he would have been more and more bitter, because he would have lost more and more control over the child. Because that child was his property. It was not a spirit to nurture, to guide, to help along his path. That child was his property for him to control, for him to dictate to. For him to mold into what he wanted that child to be. And not allow that child to be who it was. And who God meant it to be. And part of his bitterness is because that's the way he was raised. So the next time you people out there who claim you're Christian want to come out and judge somebody like me and Cassandra, I think her name was. You want to judge us because she's a shaman and I'm what I call a spirit talker, simply for having that ability. The next time you judge us for that, stop and think about that. The next time you choose to pray to anybody other than God himself, and even Jesus Christ, who also was once a human being. The difference is Jesus Christ was a human with the Spirit of God in him. All of us have a portion of the Spirit of God. But nobody has the Spirit of God Jesus had. Nobody. Jesus would be considered more a spirit that took human form than a human that took spirit form. So, judge not, lest ye be judged by the same standards as you judge others. Remember that. Because you are no holier, nor no more righteous than anybody else when you choose to ostracize and judge others simply for the gifts they possess that God gave them, simply for how God created them. God doesn't care if you give consent to his creations. That's not your place. Stop trying to take over God's job. That is not your place. And it is not your place to judge me, or Cassandra, or anybody else who can see the spirits. Cassandra doesn't see them as clearly as I do. Cassandra sees the spirits as a waviness. I see the spirit as if it's sitting there, just like my body is in this camera right now. That's how I see the spirits. And sometimes I don't even know they are spirits. I'll be out in public and I'll see somebody walking along and smile at me, and I'll smile and wave back. And then all of a sudden they disappear into a wall that used to be a door but is a wall now. Because they looked just like any other human being. Just like the day Lester went up and talked to Fidel while he was working on the barn for the cows. And I thought I seen 4 or 5 other people over there who was helping Fidel. But now that I know what I know, maybe they were watching Fidel. But I thought they were helping Fidel, and when Lester got over to the barn, and then he kind of scanned around on his property, and I seen some of them walking away, I thought maybe it was Fidel's helpers going to get some help. And then in that video, Lester talks about how he's alone over there. It was Native Americans standing there watching Fidel. Whether they were watching him to make sure he didn't fall, or whether they were watching him to make sure he didn't do what he was doing. I don't know. But they were watching him. And when Lester came and was speaking to Fidel, they figured they didn't need to watch him anymore. Lester was there to watch him. And then they started to communicate with me in a more solid form through my dreams and when I was awake, to ask me to ask Lester to welcome them so that they could welcome him. Before Lester started actually looking for, if Lester takes a look at his videos and looks at a video where he talks about they were going to look for at a piece of land, and I think it was in the west, but I'm not sure, it might have been the east. If he looks on that video, he will find a comment from me. It'll either be from an angry Native American, or under what I am now, Crystal Nobody. And he will find a comment from me where it says, Lester, you will find your land north of you. And I've said that on several of his videos where he was looking for land. I kept telling him he would find that north of him, because that's what the spirits were saying. That land called to him, and he longed for that land. And whether or not he chooses to welcome the spirits, he is always forever welcome on that land, in human form or spirit form. That land is his. It is easier for the spirits to protect him if he welcomes them, and easier for the spirits to work with him. But for them to welcome him, they don't need that. And they want something where Lester can look over and say, yeah, I remember that promise to the spirits, whenever he decides he wants to do something with that land. To know he made a promise to the spirits. And that he must keep that promise. Because, as I said, in life, the spirits are the same in death. And in life, those Native American spirits too frequently were promised things by the colonial, or made agreements with colonials, and those promises and agreements were broke. They want Lester to do something to make sure that they know that Lester will keep that promise and he will remember it. And they don't think it's too much to ask. And neither do I. And those of you choosing to judge me or anybody else for speaking to the spirits, remember that the next time you go to pray to a saint. Remember the next time you put on that saint medallion as a necklace. What you're wearing is a picture of a dead human being that you can't even see their spirit of. But you count on that spirit and you pray to that spirit. I'm not counting on the Native American spirits to do anything more than what they are already willing to do, protect the land. And I'm not praying to those spirits. I'm just having a conversation.